this morning I wanted to share with you how do the subject of smart city impact the way we are producing our public service, and how does it question, in fact, us as a public authority in the way we produce, which public service do we produce and how should we produce it, and of course in cooperation with the individuals, the citizens, and also the private sectors. So it's really the major change for me for smart city. First, of course, at the start of the smart city, and why do we speak about smart city, is because of data. The big change, and I think it's what you've shared also during the first day, is the data in the city, and the city also becoming also managing the city, becoming also the management of flow of information in order to deliver services and to plan, operate, and also live in the city. So when we talk about data, what is it? Is it the ability to collect the data through different sensors, through Internet of Things, but also to plan data through modeling, and to also the ability to process this data. So that's also all the question of big data, and how to be able also to interface different source of data and data on different subject, and therefore we also need to develop special infrastructures. In Lyon, we had this strong choice of developing our own public infrastructure. But that's also the question on how do we provide data to the city users. And this also, here we have new tools, of course, our smartphone that enables mobile internet, but also interactive information that we can provide in the city. So this data, it's historic data we can analyze, it's real data we can also provide and analyze real time, but also information, the capacity to predict a certain number of data and to have predictive models. And this data, of course, impact us as users of the city. It impacts the operator of the cities, so the companies, and also us as a city, as a public authority. So this major change in the way we think about urban services, I wanted to give a very simple example, and as I discussed with Christine, I won't go too deep in the presentation of a key project that was on mobility, Optimode, and two projects on opticities. But I want to give you the example of mobility because I think it's the most mature example, and also because it's the closer, I think, as a city user, what we can experience. And so for mobility, the core the core work that has been done over the 4-5 past years is to collect this mobility data, all mobility data on the territory, should it be from private, from public, or from individuals, and to make it interoperable and to make it accessible also to service providers. And this data, so that has been collecting through our data platform, Data Grand Lyon, enable also to develop then services. So the work on this data is first to go to all data provider and request opening the data, then make it interoperable and make it accessible through a dedicated infrastructure, but also data also produced through the development of predictive models on traffic. And data is, maybe not very sexy, but what is sexy is to get value out of data. And of course, how do we get value of data is first to providing services thanks to data to the end users, but also that because providing information and requesting information enables us also to involve all stakeholders in the city differently. And this involvement, and first of all of the citizens, is very key in a smart city. So a smart city, even if I would say the origin, the base is on data, and all the tools that enables us to collect, process, and distribute information, it's the value of it is the way we use it as as a city user or a service provider, and also the way it changes also the way we interact with our stakeholders. So these new abilities and give us new capacity of understanding the city, and this what makes also the capacity of action in the city and interaction with the different stakeholders evolve. So first, there are, as we mentioned, new tools and new understandings that also give new functions in the city. And as a city user, that also for me, it's new ways of using and evolving in the city. To continue on the example of mobility, it's the access to information and multimodal information give me as a city user also a better capacity to understand mobility and to know what are the mobility service, and so it enables me to use much wider services in terms of mobility. And so I have new practice of mobility because I can either use public transportation, individual transportation, maybe alternative way of transportation through bikes, but also maybe request services from peer-to-peer platforms. And so this new capacity of actions enable a change in practices and behaviors, and it also and now it's more as a public authority, the end users also have new expectations and needs in the city in order to practice this new ability. And as service providers, it means also that we have new cultures and new methods of providing services, but also innovating and inventing services. I give the example of so just to mention here, so for urban services, where before it was really the value was really on the know-how on how to deliver and to optimize services. Should it be transportation? Should it be facility management or social services? Here, the value also comes from first the management of the information system in order to first adapt the service because I know better the end users. So thanks to this this information on the end users, I can better adapt the service. And also on the value is also on highlighting the service, and so giving access to the service through the information. So we can see that due to the role of information and data, there is a shift of the value from the operation of the services themselves to the management of the information. Should it be to optimize this service, or should it be to give further highlight on the service? And I gave the example on mobility, but we could also have used, even if it's a bit less mature today, example on energy. So it's the same today, where we have the management of networks, of energy networks, where also goes through the information, of course, of networks also, but also on the capacity of first giving real-time information on the consumption to the end consumers, and that's all the challenge also, and the hope, I would say, of the Linky in France, the Linky. Sorry, I can't find the word. Smart meter, thank you. And also so the information to give the capacity of the end users to react to the information of his own consumption, but also information on the global energy management of the global energy network, and also so it's also information that enables us to end capacity, but also to involve the end users in the organization of the public service or the service of energy management. Same as in last autumn, we also worked quite a lot with on air quality, and especially with our partner, which is Air Rhône-Alpes, Atmo Aura now, which is in charge of producing the official air quality data. And the first work is really to identify which are the data that can be collected. Of course, that's their work, but also shared, and in which condition can it be used by third parties. And also in which condition can we open this data. And from this, we'll develop further services, especially this year. And for the data, for example, in air quality, is a question where how do we collect more data, and we cross data, and especially through crowdfunding. How do we cross data between indeed specific data on air quality, but also other data of the city, and also how do we restitute this information to end users so that they can adapt their own behavior, and so their use of the city, I would say, either to protect themselves or to reduce their impact on air quality. Maybe a last example on health, because Métropole de Lyon, okay, because Métropole de Lyon also has social competencies. The first thing we worked on social aspect also is to interconnect the information systems of the different medical and social sphere, so that enables to have a continuity of service for the end users. So I was a bit long on this slide, but just I wanted to give further example on really the first thing we need to work on is information that enables to optimize and involve differently the end users. And these new capacities, in fact, change our relationship to the different actors of the city. First of all, the private sector, and also it changed the organization of the market itself. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, it was the start of smart city, and what we saw is that urban operators started to deal with information as big data, and in order to optimize their operation. And on the other hand, you had the IT operators or IT industrials that started also to come on urban services and wanted to serve urban services such as IBM or Cisco. And so what I mentioned, there was a shift in the value chain from infrastructure to data. But in fact, after a few years, what appeared is that this completely integrated services were not very operational and were quite also risky for the cities themselves. And so what really worked today and what was really developed in a very operational way, it was really information system per function. Should it be water? Should it be mobility? Should it be energy? And that's really what works. And for this, it's really the combination of the expertise from both operators, urban operators and IT. So they developed, rather than going on each other's market, they developed cooperation and partnerships. And that's, for example, in Lyon, for what happened in 2015, when Veolia and IBM joined together to answer the call for tender for the renewal of the public water service, to deliver the information system for the public water service, and which is very operational, very efficient, and so it appeared to be much more relevant per field. And another shift also and change in the private sector is, of course, the new way of designing and inventing new services, and of course digital digital evolution and induce shorter innovation cycles, and because and also request professional or public or private to test also their service in a very short time to make proof of concepts, and this based on experimentation and more incremental development of services. And this change also mean that the private sector, the industries do not innovate as maybe only in research and development internally, but really need to interact with startups, with the end users, in order to develop their service. So that's, of course, open innovation, and which means also that there are new needs of companies due to that, because they need to experiment in the city, because they need also to find places in order to work with the public authority when it's on public space or on public services. They need also to work with startups that have new competencies that maybe they don't have, also new flexibility they don't have internally. And also they need to work much further with the end users in order to optimize and develop and invent service. And the last shift, maybe the more recent one, is also with the platform, with the apparition and the raise up of the platforms, which in fact their function is to match supply and demand on, mass volume of supply and demand. Should be in mobility, for hotel, or for anything, or for just renting some of your equipment. And this, once again, is possible through information systems that interconnect peer-to-peer on certain subjects. And so this means that more than optimizing information systems, the value here is really in the intermediation between supply and demand. And which is the connection with it gives also new function and a new role to the people and the end users itself, that become, because of the access to information and because of the capacity of also giving their information, their requests, their needs, give much more weight and capacities to the users and the people themselves, and which also enables to provide services that is really tailored to each person, tailored according to who I am, tailored also according to where I am, and maybe what is in which context, which, for example, what time of the day I am. So it's really the ability also to specify the services that are developed. Of course, the other change in the role of the citizens and the users of the city, the people themselves, in the services and in the city, is also, as we have seen before for the private sector, in co-creation and co-design. So the citizen is seen as experts of their own use, and they are involved upstream now also for the design of service and of the city. And last, the change in the role of the citizen also is due to the capacity now to co-produce public service. Today in mobility with carpooling, also or to provide also, for example, help to a neighbor or elderly or young people. So more on social also services, and this capacity of co-production public service is a major shift. Also, we have to integrate us as a public authority. So as a public authority, we see that before we had we had quite a linear I would say relationship with our partners. So maybe as far as the public services are concerned, we gave a framework or decided a direction, and then maybe we recruited a private companies that deliver the service to the end user. Now it's the cooperation is much more iterative, much more complex as well, and it needs to cooperate together really upstream in order to design the services. And for us, the opportunity in smart city is, of course, first it means that we need to rethink our smart city to give our services also so that our services are more relevant, but also is to optimize our public service. So I mentioned we mentioned mobility. I mentioned also in the water delivery that the crossing information from water treatment, water network, operators, on-site operators, but also customer service enables to give real-time answer when there are crises, for example, but also on daily operations. And that's where governance is the most involved. What's also changed for us as a public authority is really we need to leverage really on these private services, also for services that is in of public interest. And we need to leverage also on the citizen involvement and the citizen involvement in the co-production of public service and city service. And so which means that we switch, in fact, from a role of operating the city of more of coordinating services in the city. So, and to coordinate the service of the city, it means that what do we need to define? We need to define a framework that defines first the public interest or the common interest, because I think that's the role of the public authority to be the warrant for the for public and common interest, and then to give the capacities of the actors of the city to innovate, to provide the service. And that's so that's really what we work on our smart city strategy. Is how do we, facing urban challenging, how do we work all together in order to to foster innovation on the territory and to invent the city of tomorrow. And so the value for why do we do it, of course, is to create value, first for people, new services, new access to services, more efficient city and quality of life, for our companies, because we think that also smart city is a good factor for economic and attractivity of our territory, but we need to provide them the condition for innovation and experimentation on our territory, and of course for our administration and public authority to optimize, better focus, and also and make our public service more sustainable. What I wanted to, I do this one first. So in order so our role is really how do we produce the condition for innovation, for developing this new service on our territory, and therefore we, the Lyon Metropole de Lyon decided really to focus on how to develop infrastructures, public infrastructures, but also meaning that infrastructures that are independent also from major private actors, in order for people, but also private sector to develop this service. And the example on all the work that has been done on data is very interesting for that and very idiomatic. First, we developed a public infrastructure, the data platform. which is independent, which enables also interoperability of all data on the territory, and which enables to go also toward the different actors of the city to foster, to have a proactive open data strategy. And then also a framework of governance has been also defined around data, defining different levels of licenses and enabling also traceability of the use of data and especially of strategic data. So that means that there is also a framework that enables trust between partners and that enables us also to foster open innovation. And then we need to animate because, of course, on data, for example, opening data is not sufficient if we don't animate and we don't push projects, and therefore the Tuba was created in this optic 2 or 3 years ago. We bring together our partners in key events, either on specific topic or more generally on our smart city strategy, and because we want to mobilize and to boost really our what we call our smart city makers, that are all actors, either individuals, companies, or academics, of course, in order to produce this the new service and the new way of city. And in this creating capacities, I think creating also capacity and developing the capacity of citizens is very important also. And saying that there are several aspects, first through information and education on the challenges of smart city and on data, but also on developing the interface in order to give them the ability of contributing to the public services. And of course, part of these conditions is the development of all the digital infrastructures that is needed for this sector. And last, I just wanted to say that our smart city strategy and our choice was also to say that we should not choose in specific sectors when we talk about smart city. It's really all our public services and all our fields of competencies that are impacted and changed through this digital move. Even if mobility is very mature now, we work really on all our public fields through this theme of smart city. Should it be, and the objective for us is, of course, is to have a metropole that is easier to live in, so more agile, and we talk about mobility. We talk also of new forms of working and living in the city, and we had a large focus on co-working. We want a city that is more efficient, sustainable, balanced in terms of dealing with environmental resources, and that's the more traditional also understanding of a smart city. How do we organize flows in the city on energy, water, waste, etc. A city that also enables us to be more human, and also to address inclusion. What is also smart city for sensitive districts, and for how do we use also digital as both as a tool and a topic toward education, and also a city and a metropole that we want more, I would say, richer, more vibrant, more creative, because this additional also layer of information also give us the opportunity to have a new experience of the city, to give better access to culture, for example, or to enhance the city itself. So that's what I wanted to share this morning with you, is really how how smart city, far beyond the technologies themselves and far beyond data, question us as our role as a public authority and our relationship both with the end users, the citizens, and also all our partners in a way that we need really to co-create, and which means also that we need to develop the framework for this co-creation in the city, physically, but also what I didn't mention, of course, on legal aspect, on also on the definition of our sphere of competencies themselves. Thank you.